So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for all the listeners. Welcome to our next episode of Digital Health Off the Records, your podcast where we share the latest clinical technology trends, news, and obviously share our unfiltered insights. I'm Edwin Cohen from CM Flow, and today, obviously, hosting this together with
Farrell Healion from Optitrial. And today we have a guest with us, that is Ross Jackson, who is an expert in patient recruitment, and he literally wrote the book on it. So he's also the author of the Patient Recruitment Conundrum. So we're obviously going to take advantage of his expertise and dig into the topic of patient recruitment today. So, Ross, if there's anything else you want to introduce, or otherwise, you can also introduce patient recruitment and let us know what it is and what it isn't, because it's whenever you're out there, there's so many different supply solutions, and it's hard to know where to start when it comes to things.
Cool. Yeah, sure. No, thanks. Yeah, as you said, I'm a patient recruitment specialist. I've been doing it for many years, written 2 books about it. And I think it's one of those things that is still a massive problem for the industry. It's still the biggest reason that trials are delayed, which is incredible, considering the amount of resource and the number of clever people that are in this industry. Still not been able to fix this. And I think there are reasons for it, which we'll probably come on to, the fundamental underlying reasons for why patient recruitment is still a problem. But yeah, it's people tend to think of it as once the trial has been set up, then we look at recruiting the patients for the trial. I say that is not a great idea, because that is one of the reasons that trials don't recruit enough patients, because you don't think about patient recruitment early enough in the process. It's not like a bolt-on. It's not like, here's the trial, this is what we want to achieve. Oh, now we need to get some patients. Without patients, you've got no trial. So patient recruitment it's a fundamental thread that should really run through trial design. Every operational decision that you make, you should think about it with a patient recruitment hat on at some point, just to think, right, well, is this going to affect whether we can recruit patients or retain them? I always include retaining patients as part of recruitment. If you've recruited the wrong patients, they're not going to stay on the trial. If you've recruited patients, but your trial is set up such that the burden of participation is so onerous that they're going to drop out again. You need to have that in mind when you're designing the trial. So yeah, patient recruitment is effectively, it's a fundamental issue that should be addressed as early as possible and throughout the process. It's not a bolt-on that people think it is, and even more, it is not about advertising, which tends to be what people think it is. It can be an element. Advertising is very valuable in this space, but patient recruitment is not just, we'll just reach out to other people, or as the CROs seem to suggest, we'll just open some more sites. That's what their default for patient recruitment is. We'll get some more sites. The sites will have the patient. There's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah. Ross, thanks for giving the introduction already. Great to have you on the recording. I want to say that as well. Are you also able to elaborate a little bit how the patient recruitment has evolved over the last couple of 2 decades, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed, we do. That's pretty much the period I've been working in the field. And yeah, I mentioned advertising a second ago, and that's what people think about a lot of the time when they're thinking about patient recruitment. So how do we actually reach the patients, which is very important. One of the fundamental problems with getting patients into trials is lack of awareness. People don't know that trials exist. And I've said this a few times, but 5 years ago, 6 years ago, the whole world knew that a clinical trial existed. There was one particular clinical trial that everyone knew about. Unfortunately, we didn't parlay that into the whole world knowing that all clinical trials in general exist. So we've stepped back a bit. It was a big problem before COVID, and it's still a big problem now. People just are not aware of clinical trials. Anyone in the industry will have found this when they say, you're talking to someone who doesn't know what you do for a living, and you have to spend quite a long time explaining what it is you actually do, because they just don't think, oh, really? What's that? And then, even the, paracetamol you take, there was a clinical trial for it, all these things, everything's gone through a clinical trial. So you have to do all that. The evolution of it over that period, I think people did think awareness was the biggest problem, probably. So it was about then what we might call, from the marketing perspective, getting people into the top of the funnel. So we reach out to more people, we'll eventually get people down the funnel and they'll become trial participants. So there was a lot more focus on that. There's been a move throughout clinical trials, I'm sure, to get primary care physicians to recommend clinical trials to patients. Clinical trial as a care option is a big movement. In my experience, I've very, very rarely seen healthcare professionals, as in the primary care physician, actually be successful at recruiting patients, referring patients, without something else having happened. Maybe the patient has asked them about it or whatever, but it's very rare, usually because of the time availability. Most people go to their doctor, don't go saying, oh, I want to take part in a clinical trial. They go because I've got this problem. So you spend the time diagnosing the problem, etc. Doctors tend not to know, the primary care doctors, about clinical trials, or sometimes not even think they're a good idea. I think that's another point. I think that it's a trial. It's not a proven treatment. So, some doctors think, oh, this is a bit of a risk, so they won't do it. Over the years, that has still stayed around. So there are still an issue. Primary care physicians still don't refer patients into trials. The advertising bit has evolved. Back in the day, it was more about local press advertising and local radio. Now, these things can still work. Local press, I think in the UK, there's pretty much, is there local press anymore? There's some free newspapers, I think, but I don't think there's much in the way of local press. In America, it's quite different. I think the local press there is still it's quite popular. Local radio is very popular in America as well, and in Britain to an extent, and Europe, other elements. So those things can work, but it's very much evolved over that time into a digital outreach. So in terms of the actual advertising to get the awareness, primarily digital. When I first started doing it, we were looking at Google advertising. Well, actually, Google advertising, it was Google's SEO, so Google search listings, then advertising. Facebook advertising came along and pretty much blew everything out of the water in terms of how successful it was. And what you'll find even today is, certainly I find this, probably the majority of patient recruitment agencies, or agencies that call themselves patient recruitment agencies, are primarily digital marketing agencies, and their primary tool is Facebook advertising, which is fine. It works. Facebook is very, very successful at getting people into that top of the funnel to get the awareness, but it's not the only thing. There are plenty of other digital methods as well. There are plenty of other patient recruitment methods. So I think the evolution has tended to focus in that awareness, that awareness piece, trying to get people aware that there are such things as clinical trials. What people are starting to be more interested in over the last few years, certainly you see this at conferences a lot more, is more about the access piece. And that's not just about, underrepresented populations, it's just about anybody. Anybody who can take part in a trial should be able to. So if the research site is too far away for them to get to, that's a problem of accessibility. So you might want to open different sites. But it's still there, that the awareness is treated as the biggest problem, in my reckoning. And there's certain things that I've been involved with and other people have been involved with. The awareness is, we can do that now. It's not as difficult, so things are slightly different now.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because it seems, for a very risk-averse industry, it seems that this is an area where we've actually taken advantage of the innovation and the new tools and approaches with, big data, dare I say, Cambridge Analytica. So doing the personalized outreach and ads, because, even on my social media, I get, some ads for, healthy volunteer flu camps every so often.
Yeah.
So it really does hit home, and especially if you just have a casual conversation, you'll have things pop up on your phone these days, no doubt. I do think it's interesting you mentioned about the awareness piece too, because when we did our presentation at DIA, one of the really interesting statistics to me was that only about 2 to 5% of people who could participate in a trial actually participate, which just shows that you are really trying to access a very, very small percentage of patient population. So I do think that awareness is definitely a big part of it. So I was just wondering, what would be some good approaches when it comes to trying to tackle that? Because you mentioned about like the old days was using some more of the like printed press and so on, which could be more challenging when you're trying to access like a global trial in different countries. But I guess using personalized ads and things on social media, that could carry across any global region technically.
Yeah, I mean, there's different regulations as well in different countries. So digital obviously gives you a much more global footprint, which is great. So you can do that. And if you've got that sort of huge trial, yes, you are looking at a different level of resource going into it and different types of awareness. I've spoken to a lot of sponsors who run the global trials, and fundamentally, do they really care whether all their patients are recruited in America, or do they want some in America, some in Europe, some in Africa, some in Australia, etc.? Probably they don't care. So long as they get enough patients, it's not that big an issue.
I think
Probably
there's
should
some
be.
changes coming with that now.
Yeah,
Some countries are introducing regulations to say that if you want to get the top dollar as the payer, you need to have X percentage of patients from our country, which is a fun evolution.
I agree. It's a good thing. From the sponsor's perspective, it's a bit of an irritant potentially, but yeah, I think possibly the regulation. This is another area that's changing over the years for patient recruitment. The government-led regulations about what to do. Getting the patient voice in at trial design stage, having a representation. All these things are coming in. They should have been there from the industry, but the regulators are imposing them. And I think that's a good point about, if you're running a global trial and you want to get access to the market there, you should be making sure that there are patients recruited rather than simply the example I gave, which is based on experience, not just made up of the sponsors saying, "Oh, great. Well, okay, we've got a presence here, we've got a presence there, but most of the patients are coming from here. No problem." And that's I suppose that's a purely commercial idea. How else do you reach the people? I've worked on various projects where we managed to get press coverage, not from paid advertising, which is an interesting one. It's difficult, but you can do it. The idea there is not necessarily to reach out to, so that the patients will see it. Patients will read this. We're talking about the Times, the UK Times newspaper we're talking about here. So some patients will read it, but actually getting that sort of coverage is a great way to reach out back to your sites to say, look, we're in the Times with this particular trial. Can you push it a bit more? So I think one of the things about getting more patients recruited is you have to get the sites involved. Despite DCT and hybrid trials and whatever, sites are a fundamental element. You can't operate trials generally without them. So get them involved and get them helping, get their voice involved from the trial design stage, and then encourage them and engage them ongoing. And this is another way to get that done.
Do you have good examples of that? Because I echo what you say. It's sort of the funnel where sort of the sites are the true, well, I wouldn't say gatekeepers, but that's where the success most likely sits. But knowing sites where they are having multiple studies running at the same time, competing in the same therapeutic area, obviously, or maybe competing with other departments that are looking at cardiovascular outcome study, for example. That's sort of widespread across the hospitals. So how and what do we need to then do in order to get sites sort of truly on board and allow them to manage the huge amount of influx of new patients or potential patients?
Yeah, I mean one example there worked well actually, because being able to reach out to the sites to say, look, we've got this press coverage that isn't an advert. It keeps it top of mind. It's one thing I always say, that if you keep your trial top of mind with the sites, we got two things that can happen there. They think, oh great, okay, it's in my head and there's a patient that might work, brilliant. Or they might just try and, oh, we best get some patients over there so they don't keep bothering us. This is another way it can work. Another way is to, I think most sites would certainly agree with this. Why don't we pay the sites on time and properly, and that sort of thing? So that if you've got a good relationship with a site because they are happy to work with you, it's easy. Certainly, if they've been involved in the trial design stage in the first place. Again, these are examples I've worked on where the sites that are more motivated and more engaged have had that input. They've had good communication. You can try at every stage to say, right, it's always going to be, there's always going to be a variance. There's always going to be some sites that recruit more patients than others, and you can try to get the sites involved. Right, let's try and copy what this site is doing compared to what the lower performers may be doing. Mixed success in that one. The sites tend not to have much time to be doing that, but you can share the information. Possibly a couple of times, well, I'd say yes, definitely a couple of times where there's been some sort of element of competition involved. It has worked, being able to share the information. These sites are doing well. Maybe not, you're not doing well at your site, but these are the best performing sites. So it does encourage people, but it's about that communication ongoing, and it's about treating them well, treating the sites as an integral part of the process rather than a necessary evil.
And touching on that, because you're mentioning about successful sites, what would a good success rate look like for sites? Because it's often the case that a site might overpromise and then underperform, which there's a whole variety of reasons we mentioned about competing studies and so on.
Yeah.
But what would be let's say a good average when it comes to successful site performance?
Unfortunately, it just varies all the time. This is the consultant's answer, of course, but it does. You can't really point to it and say that success is based on the actual circumstances you're operating in. Pareto principle works to an extent within this, like it does with everything else. So you will get mostly, 70-80% of the sites providing the bulk of the patients into the trial. 20-30% of the certainly usually you'll get, it depends how big the trial is, of course. I mean, some very small trials where you're only looking for 30 patients or something, phase 2 or something like that, then yeah, you might only have 5 sites or fewer. So you can't really gauge much on that. And in a much bigger trial, you will let's say there's 100 sites, say, I'd expect 20 of them never to recruit any patients at all. So success would be if they did, which would be great. The majority of them are in the middle somewhere. They might recruit 1 patient or maybe 2. And the higher performers, the 10, 20, maybe even 30% of the top will have 10 plus each or even more. And that's a fairly well distributed path. Trying to get the good performers. This is one thing that is interesting with sites. If I'm working directly with a sponsor, which is quite often the case, it'll be when I identify the sites that are working best, I might actually simply say, well, to be honest, there's no point trying to get these other people to do better because it's going to be quicker to get these good ones to do if they do 1% better, you'll get there quicker than you'd get these people to do 100% better. So I'm not ignoring the other ones, but it can be more fruitful just to concentrate on those. So it's a distribution that varies whatever you're looking at, to be honest.
Yeah, so there's obviously a lot of different type of activities that teams on global level, country level can initiate. But obviously, we always need to look at cost,
Yep.
and definitely the clinical operations organization is always pressured to reduce costs as much as we can. But how much do we need to spend? Obviously, we try to avoid bringing in these type of recruitment initiatives, but if we still need to, how much would it cost us, or how far do we want to go? Do you have any indication of what is commonly used or spent on these kind of activities?
Yeah, and again, it varies, of course. So, and it varies basically. It's all about difficulty of recruiting, isn't it? That's one of the things. That's one of the variables here. And it's also about the value at the end of the day. If it's a rare disease trial, for example, where there are by very nature very few people with the condition, the sponsors may be prepared to pay $50,000 plus per patient to recruit each individual patient, even more than that I've seen, and then fly people across to different countries and put them up in hotels. All sorts of things can happen.
Yeah.
If it's a very common condition, say dermatology or something like that, so the cost may be down to $50 to $100 per patient recruited. And the costs. It's interesting about the direct costs here, because obviously there's operational costs that go along this as well. But just to pay a recruitment company to recruit the patients, the models that they use, probably the ones that I suggest are more transparent. It's a flat rate of you're just paying for their time, so you know what you're going to get. Now, whether they recruit any patients or not, you know what they're doing. Or at the other end, there are some agencies that go with a purely performance related. Well, I've rarely seen a purely performance related one. It's usually a setup and maybe an ongoing, access to our platform fee, and then per patient. But the average there, we're talking mostly, if you're going to that level, you're probably talking $5,000 to $10,000 range is what people are paying per patient. There's another model that can be used, which is pay per lead, which is just to refer, someone's gone through a pre-screener online, or even not gone through the pre-screener. They just clicked a button, say, I'm interested. That could count as a lead. You don't know what the quality is there. So it varies on the different models. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking to recruit patients, you can be anywhere from $50 to $50,000. So,
Is there like a more common approach? Because previously, when I was evaluating some suppliers in that space, it was kind of odd that they put more, well, I say weird, but obviously from their side, it's sensible. But there was more of a focus on a patient referred for screening rather than having more of an incentive on the patient that gets randomized, which could cause a challenge or burden to the site of having to go through screening of more patients for just wasted time and effort ultimately.
I can see why organizations do that, because once it's out of the recruitment company's hands, it is literally out of their hands. So the screening process at the site, they can't do anything about it. They've done their job because they've put forward someone who said they're interested and will have usually passed a pre-screener of some sort based on the protocol and the inclusion-exclusion criteria. So that I can see why that works. The model that tends to work best there, I think, is maybe you've got a tiered level. So you've got, right, so in order that they don't do lots of work and make no money at all, they want to see, right, for sending people through to screening, here's a fee. If they randomize, here's a bigger fee on the other end of it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense in my mind, because just screening for the sake of screening doesn't add value. And eventually it's about getting them all randomized. So that says something about maybe the quality of the screenings performed.
Yes, and that's an issue in fairness, because I mean we all fill things in online and get them wrong. So if it's just an online pre-screener, and it comes through, the person might be sent through for screening when they don't qualify, or they might not. They might be rejected and they could qualify. So again, there's a lot of different approaches here. It's really only once the site gets involved, and even when the site gets involved, I've worked on projects in the past where the site's rejected the people, and then we've got a specialist to come and review the rejections and found 10, 15, maybe 20% of them actually would qualify. So this is from a phone screening, say from the site when they've rung up. So again, and this is down to people not knowing what the name of the medication is, all those things when they were diagnosed, because who does? And then that's where you need the health records, etc. But yeah, so it's not that easy to get people through that screening process, really.
So Ross, we started the discussion with sort of looking at the evolution of recruitment, what happened and what was done in the last couple of 20 years. But the current world is changing rapidly, and especially the digital innovation. If you need to comment on and share your thoughts around how the future would look like, what's going to be the biggest changer in, yeah, we can talk about the next 2 decades, but maybe we need to look a little bit closer even because it's going so fast.
Well, at some point there will not be a job for people like me. There will be no human clinical trials at some point. I'm convinced of that. There will be the technology. There'll be so much. I mean, there's so much data that gets recorded now. There's probably already enough data for most conditions that maybe you don't need if it was actually accessible somehow. Digital twins are obviously going to be coming on board. I'm sure there'll be synthetic biologies that are used to actually run trials with. So yeah, I mean that's sometime in the future. I would say within 50 years. Some people say maybe within 20, and maybe even within 10, this may start to happen. You never know, because I think the pace of change is incredible. I first started using Google in the mid-90s. Sorry, I didn't use Google in the mid-90s. I used the internet in the mid-90s. Google was launched in 1998 as a company, and then I started to use it a little bit after that. And it took quite some time for that to actually really seep into the public consciousness. When I was first doing what I do, I was having to persuade people that the internet would actually last a long enough time. And now, could anyone survive in the world without the internet? So it took Google a long time. It's taken AI this much time in comparison, as in public-facing AI such as ChatGPT. I've been using that for 3+ years. I think it's not even 4 years old that it was publicly available. And just the difference I spot with the things that I'm, when I think, oh, I'll just do this. I brainstorm a lot with it, and the quality of the response you get now. I mean, that Turing test was out the window ages ago. AI is definitely going to make a big difference. Within the industry, within the clinical trials industry, people are focusing on AI in terms of the new tools that are coming in. So, a chart review is the most obvious one. It's quicker because AI is great for synthesizing lots of information. It's much better now even than it was a few years ago. So and the accuracy is there. Other different AI tools. I've spoken with many people who are offering an AI voice assistant, which actually helps with patient recruitment in the sense that one of the issues that delays people getting into trials is the fact that they may have applied, but then the site doesn't get around to speaking to them for a little while. I know plenty of sites who have maybe Friday afternoon is the only time they ever call the applicant, or once a fortnight. And people have forgotten by that time. So who are you? What trial? What are you talking about? Or they can't get through, so go to the bottom of this. AI voice agent never gets tired, and they can phone 1,000 people at the same time. So those things can work, and I think they're much better than they used to be. These are the things that are coming in. My own view, I've been looking at things from the way the real world uses AI rather than the way our world uses AI, and people are using Claude and ChatGPT to interrogate it effectively. where maybe even 2 years ago people would use Google, click to the website to find out more. Now they're just going into ChatGPT, tell me about this, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more, and they're just asking questions of ChatGPT and probably never even view that website. So the AI visibility issue is one that I think probably the majority of the industry is not yet woken up to, but I think it's definitely there because it will put people off if they can't find information about the trial, or worse, they find false information, which is likely to happen.
And maybe touching a little on that, something we covered before on the podcast was about having synthetic control arms. Do you think that's probably going to come along sooner than
Yep.
the 50, 20, whatever years? Because
yeah,
that could have a massive impact to recruitment because you're saving half the patients or whatever percentage your placebo is, or placebo could be standard of care. So it could alleviate a lot of the burden of recruitment because your numbers getting smaller, right?
Yeah, indeed, and it's I won't say it's already in place a lot, but it's definitely things that it's coming down the track very fast. Because why wouldn't you? Like I say, the data is there. One of the big problems for patient recruitment over the years has been the amount of data that the scientists want to collect, because the clinicians look at what they can collect and think, oh, why don't we? Oh, we can collect. Oh, yeah, why don't we find out this? So all the endpoints grow and grow and grow, and over the last 20 plus years, the inclusion exclusion criteria has become grown like this. Inclusion criteria gets very small, exclusion criteria gets very big, and the endpoints get enormous. And then there's not a lot of data being gathered that probably doesn't need to be for the individual molecule itself or the individual treatment, potential treatment. But it's there, the data's there. So, being able to use that synthetic control arm, whatever it may be, digital twins, even you could use similar stuff. Then, yeah, I think that's definitely going to affect the whole industry and certainly the recruiting of patients. It's going to make it more specialised recruiting patients, and it's going to make it.
Yeah.
I could foresee something in the future where you've got synthetic patient recruitment specialists who are actually designing what this would look like for this patient and how to get this working. That's not impossible to imagine.
Sounds like we're uploading you to Skynet.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Super. Ross, I think we are sort of closing and ending, reaching the end of the podcast. I thought your insights were really, really useful. And I definitely learned new stuff, definitely some details around this and around patient recruitment. I think my important takeaway is it's sort of we can all digitize it and we consider it digital marketing, but to me the bottleneck is still, so I'm not going to blame sites, but it's the human eventually that's maybe considered to be part of the bottleneck, and that's probably where most of the solution is as well. I don't think challenge you a little bit around the future, that I think the human will always be in the loop somewhere. So I don't think you will be out of a job in the next 2 or 3 decades. But just my humble opinion here. But yeah, I really would like to thank you for sharing your insights and your expertise here. Farrell, anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I think the other thing that jumped out to me is ultimately the success of recruitment always starts with design, which at the end of the day, that's make or break for your trial is how do you design it. If you're more complex than the competitor, you're less likely to get the patient, or if you're too strict and narrow on your inclusion exclusion, again, you're narrowing the potential patient population that you're able to access as well. So yeah, thank you, Ross. That was wonderful.
Yeah, can I just add a quick thing on that? So I think for myself, it's all about the human. It's all about the trial design. I mostly get brought in when the trial is already failing. Help us rescue it. And I always say to people, nothing I'm doing today that I couldn't have done at the design stage. So bring someone in at that stage, wear your patient recruitment hat when you're designing trials, and the key is design a trial as though it's for you or someone you love. And then you will not put this big burden onto people, and you'll get more people interested and more people will stay on it.
Absolutely.
I couldn't close the session with better words than just that, Ross. Thank you very much for sharing your insight. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Everyone knows where to find the podcast nowadays, so just sign up if you haven't, and look out for the next recording. Farrell, any final closing remarks for today?
And yeah, if you want to join us, like Ross has, feel free to reach out and we'll try and get something arranged. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.
Right.
Cheers.